So you found a seller who's interested in selling their land. Now what? This is where most people freeze because they don't know how to negotiate. You might be thinking, what if I say the wrong thing and lose the deal? Or what if they push back on my offer? Or I hate negotiating. I don't want to sound like a pushy salesperson. I get it. The good news is you don't have to be an FBI negotiator to get great deals. You just need a simple, structured process. And that's exactly what I'm going to walk you through today. I use a two-call close strategy, which means negotiations feel natural and eliminates pressure for both you and the seller. By the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to structure your calls, make offers, and handle objections with confidence. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Only Land Fans Launchpad series. I'm Kendall, and this is the podcast that shows you exactly how to flip land without ever buying it. If you've ever felt nervous about negotiating with land sellers, this episode is for you. Today, I'll walk you through my two-call close system so you never feel lost in negotiations again. Let's dive in. Most people make one big mistake when negotiating. They try to get everything done in one call. But when you rush a deal, two things happen. One, you don't have enough information to make a strong offer. And two, the seller feels pressured and pushes back. That's why I use a two-call close system. On call one, I just gather information and build rapport. There's no offer. There's usually no talk of money. All I'm trying to do is figure out if the seller is qualified and if they're open to actually doing a deal. The second call is where I actually present the offer and handle objections. This method keeps sellers comfortable, gets you better deals, and increases your closing rate. Now, let's break it down step by step. The first call is where I build rapport and qualify the seller. On this call, you're not negotiating. You're simply building rapport and qualifying the seller. Here's the exact structure I use. First, I verify ownership. I say something like, "Hey, Mr. Seller, I'm following up about your lot at 123 Main Street. Do you have a few minutes?" Next, I'm going to ask about their situation. "Can you tell me how'd you come into owning the property?" I really love this open-ended question because that allows them to go down whatever rabbit hole they want and present what information they feel necessary to present to you. You can get a lot of information by opening up, by asking a simple question like, how did you come into owning the property? They may tell you about, oh, I bought this property because I wanted to build on it and then I retired in a different city. Or, oh, I bought this property for my nephew and he decided not to live here. You can get a lot of information about that particular seller's attachment to the property and their plans for the property if you ask them how did they come into owning the property. Next is I like to find out their motivation. Why are you considering selling the property? Again, another open-ended question that just gets them to talk and open up about why they're looking into selling the property. Next is I like to determine their timeline. If I can get you an offer that makes sense, would you be open to closing within 30 days? That really allows me to drill down and figure out how serious they are about selling. You might hear a seller say, "Oh, I don't know. I'd have to talk to my wife about it." Now I know that there's a wife involved and I'll have to get her approval as well. Or they might say, "Absolutely, I've been thinking about doing this. It's time to go. Let's move." And now you know that seller is really ready to move. So here's a quick tip for you. Sellers will often tell you their real reason for selling if you just let them talk. The more you listen, the more leverage you'll have in call two whenever you call and present that offer and start negotiating. So for example, let's say a seller says that they inherited the land years ago, but they never used it. All they're doing is just paying property taxes and they have no plan on moving there. That tells you that they may be open to selling much faster than someone who just bought that property. If you want my first call one, want my full call one script? Join my free Facebook group at onlylandfansgroup.com where I share my exact call breakdown. The second step is the second call, presenting the offer and handling objections. So now that you have all the details, it's time to make your offer. Here's exactly how to do it. First, I like to call and warm up the call by asking a few more due diligence questions like, "Hey, Mr. Seller, when I was looking into your lot, I noticed that it's covered in trees. Do you know approximately how much of the property is covered in trees?" Or you can ask them, has a perk test ever been done? That's just a simple soil test to see if they can put a septic tank there. Those types of due diligence questions helps to open up the seller to negotiation versus just like doing a rapid fire, hey, here's the offer, right? So the next thing is that I present the price range. So notice it's a range. I don't ever say I'll pay 50,000. What I'll say is something like, for a lot like yours, we typically pay around $40,000 to $50,000. That is crucial. I'm giving them a range. That way they don't think it's a hard and fast number that they have to say yes or no to. It opens the door for communication. Next is I use silence to my advantage. After stating my range, I don't speak. Let the seller respond first. There's an old adage in negotiation that after a number's been put out, he who speaks first loses the game. So I always just let that number sit there. There's a range, I put it out, and I let the seller think. Sometimes it can be a full minute. Sometimes it's been 2 minutes, and 2 minutes is a long time when you are waiting for someone to speak. But don't break the silence. Let the silence build and put pressure on the seller. Here's a quick tip. If the seller pushes back, just ask, are you only looking for full market value on this? If they say yes, then I would say something like, have you thought about listing it on the MLS or getting a realtor? Because I think that's probably the best chance that you're going to get full market value. So for example, if a seller wants $60,000, but your max offer is 20,000, instead of arguing, say, listen, I totally get it. If I may ask, have you thought about listing this on the market, or have you ever listed this on the market before? This really makes them rethink their price expectations, and you'll get a lot more information as well because it's an open-ended question. They may say something like, oh, I don't want to deal with realtors. I don't want my property to just sit there for months waiting for someone to make an offer on it. Now you've got even more information that you can use in the negotiation. Step 3 is getting the contract signed on the phone. So once a seller agrees to your price, let's say that you've negotiated, the seller says yes to your price, your next step is securing the deal immediately. And here's how I do that. I first send the contract while on the phone. So I usually send digital contracts via email. So I'll say, okay, I'll send it over to you. I'll stay on the phone with you just to verify that you've received it. Sometimes the internet can be a little bit wonky. I just want to make sure that it went out to you and you were able to get it with no problem. The next step is I walk them through the agreement. So I'll say, hey, listen, while you have that contract, if you don't mind opening it up just to make sure that everything looks okay, I just want to make sure that it's formatted correctly and there are no issues once you open it. If you have a minute, I'd love to go over it with you, see if you have any questions. Then I'll walk line by line with that purchase agreement with the seller. That way they can ask questions. So I'll read the first line and say, this is your property. This is the address, correct? And I'll let them respond, yes. The next thing I'll say is, this is your name. This is the only owner on the deed. Is that correct? They'll say correct, if it is. And then the next thing is I start going through the terms of the contract. It says that I'll purchase this property at $50,000. Does that make sense to you? $50,000 is what we agreed upon. Yes. And I'll just go line by line and answer any questions that they have. Sometimes purchase agreements are written in ways that the average bear doesn't really quite grasp, like the legalese of the purchase agreement. So if you just explain it to them in clear English and see if they have any questions, you can actually knock down a lot of objections. So here's a quick tip for you. Sellers hesitate when they feel uncertain. A confused mind always says no. So walking them through that contract removes that fear and speeds up the process. So let's say a seller was hesitant to sign because they weren't sure about the closing costs. By staying on the call and explaining that you cover all of the closing costs, they will understand that, okay, they'll cover the closing costs. That was my big question, right? So if you walk through term by term with them, will really help you to be able to answer any objections. And then finally, whenever they say, you get to the very last one and you say, okay, do you have any more questions? And they say no, say, perfect. What I'll do is I'll stay on the phone with you. If you want to go ahead and click sign, I'll make sure that it transmits and it gets over to my office with no problems. I'll make sure that I can open it up and that there were no issues, that it was lost in transmission, right? So that's a really fantastic way to get the seller to go through the purchase agreement. You can answer questions and then get them to sign right there when they're hot and they're ready to say yes. So if you want a contract breakdown, you can join my free Facebook group at onlylandfansgroup.com. If negotiations has ever made you nervous, I hope this episode showed you that it doesn't have to be scary. And hey, if this episode helped you, do me a favor. Subscribe to the show, leave a quick review, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. All right, before I go, let me tell you what's coming next. You've got a deal under contract. Now, how do you find a buyer and sell it quickly? In the next episode, I'll show you exactly how to sell your land deals fast, even if you don't have a buyer's list yet. We'll cover where to find motivated buyers, how to list your land in the right places, the simple strategy that helps land sell faster, and the secret tip to getting that land in front of as many eyes as possible. If you want to learn how to sell land deals quickly and predictably, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss it. See you next time, and until then, stay dirty.